And welcome back into another episode of the Believe in Georgia Tech podcast. We are your co-host. That is RJ Schafer. I'm Jackson Caudell, coming to you on Monday, April 28th. We are recording this at 3:42 Eastern Standard Time. It's excuse me. It's been a busy week. We had the NFL draft this past weekend. We didn't want to do an episode last weekend, mostly because the spring transfer portal window was open, and it's open for a very short time. So we were going to kind of let everything settle down, look at what Tech brought in, see if Tech lost anything, and kind of evaluate it from there. We didn't want to, jump on anything, uh, before it was closed or anything. So we wanted to wait till the portal was closed. And I know that the players that are, still in the portal can commit or anything. But we wanted to kind of talk about what Tech's done in the portal. Also touch on all the other sports. Basketball's got some commitments as well. Baseball finally ended the losing streak yesterday. Had some NFL draft stuff this past weekend. But before we get into all that, RJ, how you doing, man?
I'm feeling great. Per usual, we do have a lot to talk about. And besides baseball, a lot of it's positive. Basketball's on the up and up. Football, fills some needs that we're going to talk about. And some guys got their name called at the NFL draft, and that's always great to see.
Yep, absolutely. Before we dig into all that, guys, you know the drill. If you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't subscribed already, would love it if you would join the family. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button on the video, share with your friends, share with your enemies. We need to. We're building a good audience here, and we love all the support we get. Same over with podcasts. Share over there, give a review, leave us your comments and everything. Love to hear from you guys. Um, just again, the busy work before we get into everything. So let's start with the NFL draft. Look, we kind of knew going in that there were two guys that were probably stood a better chance than most of getting drafted. Georgia Tech had quite a few guys eligible for the draft. I think, I was at their pro day, and I think they had 13 players participate. And obviously, they weren't going to have 13 players getting drafted. They were going to be lucky if they even had like a third of that. But the two guys that ended up getting an invite to the NFL Combine were Jackson Halls, the tight end, and Zeke Biggers, the defensive tackle. Those were kind of the two guys everybody was circling as, hey, these guys could be drafted. And that was exactly what happened. Jackson Halls was a fifth-round pick to the Buffalo Bills. And then Zeke, the draft was coming to an end, and I was worried he wasn't going to get picked. But the Miami Dolphins stepped up with one of the last picks of the draft, took Zeke. He is going to be there. Now, we've had some guys in the undrafted free agent world sign some deals, like Jordan Williams signed with the Atlanta Falcons as a UDFA. Love that. It made plenty. If you followed any of the pre-draft visits and all that kind of stuff, that one made a good bit of sense. Like the Falcons did have him in on a visit, and he did participate in their local pro day. Now, I know that doesn't like guarantee anything, but it did seem like the Falcons had genuine interest. And look, as a Falcons, I'm sure most people who watch this podcast are, tortured Falcons fans like myself. Um, I do think there is a chance Jordan makes the roster. They've been looking for offensive tackle depth, and look, I'm not here to guarantee anything. I'm not here to project anything, but there were some people I know that cover the NFL in depth and are a lot smarter than me on this kind of thing. And they said, look, they think he has a chance to actually make the roster, and like we'll be rooting for him to do so. It's always cool when you see a player. Jordan obviously played high school ball in the state of Georgia, plays at Georgia Tech, gets to play for the Atlanta Falcons. Like that's rare, and like I think that's the kind of thing that should be celebrated. So we're definitely all the best wishes to him. And then yesterday, a couple of rookie mini camp invites. Chase Lane got one for the New York Giants. Sylvain Yondwin, he got one for the Carolina Panthers. I apologize if I miss any. I tried to check as much as I could with everybody in the know. Those were the only ones I saw. So again, apologies if I did miss somebody. But that was kind of the NFL draft weekend. Now, I will say selfishly for Jackson Halls, every time I kept seeing Baltimore pop up, I kept thinking he was the perfect fit for Baltimore just because of, their importance and with the run game and their tight ends blocking everything. And I kept thinking, I'm going to see him go to Baltimore. But it was Buffalo who stepped up and took him. That was just something I was keeping an eye on Saturday. Kind of what were your thoughts with the fits with these players? And I guess, what maybe their outlook is for their rookie season. Look, I will just say they are day 3 picks. They are not guaranteed, or, Halls and Biggers were day 3 picks. And then obviously undrafted free agents and rookie minicamp invites. They are by no means locks to make the roster. Like even Jackson Hall's as talented as I think he is, and how much I'm pretty sure he'll make the roster. If you're a day 3 pick, you just never know. But kind of, how do you see these guys fitting in with the team, and kind of, what are your thoughts on them possibly making the roster this upcoming year?
Yeah, Jackson Hawes going to the Bills, I thought was a pretty good fit for him, and B, a pretty good fit for the Bills, because they do have that 1-2 punch of Knox and Kincaid. Past that, you do need a guy to come in and block in scenarios, and I think you know analysts had been talking all up to the draft. We had been talking all the way up to the draft that he's by far like the best blocking tight end in that draft. And, the Bills filled that need. He's probably a guy that's going to come in on 12 formation. He's not going to get a ton of looks in the receiving end, but I think he knows that, and I think he understands that. He takes the idea of being the blocking guy, and I think he loves that. He's going to have to battle out Zach Davidson again. Day 3 guy, even if you are the best blocking tight end in the draft, you're still going to have to battle for your spot. Nothing's given to you in the NFL. But I do think I think he fits in pretty well. Zeke, again, that's a very crowded room that he's being slotted into. Um, but I think, he does have the talent. Again, I'm not here to project anything. I think he could honestly make the roster, but you do see day 7 guys not make the roster. But even if he doesn't, that doesn't mean his NFL career is over. There have been guys who chasing roster spots for 3 years and then they go in and they're a starter after that 4th year. So I just want to see these guys fight for a roster spot. If they don't get it, it's not the end of the world. Like, I'm not going to be resentful against these franchises for not keeping these guys, because it is a business. And, sometimes those guys aren't ready, but I think Zeke is ready for the NFL level. And I think there are some guys that, were to the mini camp that honestly could make their way to the NFL too. I think Chase Lane's got a chance.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, the guys that are most uncertain, like it'll be interesting. Like, the rookie minicamp invites, you've got to be pretty impressive there, and then you can parlay that into a training camp invite, and then that's where you
Yeah.
really have a chance to make the roster. Like, at least with Hawes and Zeke and Jordan, like they're going to be in training camp this summer, this July with their teams. Not as certain for Sylvain and Chase, but they're going to have a chance to go there and impress. We'll definitely keep you up to date if we see anything more with some of the other guys that were out there in terms of free agent deals and everything like that. Keep you up to date, and then obviously the clock turning to 2026. Georgia Tech does have quite a few guys that are going to be draft eligible. I don't know how many will get drafted. Like a lot of it, So I wrote an article over at Georgia Tech on SI. Everybody's free to go check it out. Guys who could be drafted. I listed 10. Just 10 was just the number that came to me, and I kept coming and saying the same thing, like if they have a big year in 2025, if they have a good year, because I think there's some guys that would get drafted right now, but they could really elevate their stock with a big 2025 season. That's guys like Keelan Rutledge or Jordan Vandenberg or Kyle Eford or Amari Harvey or Rodney Shelley, like guys that have played a lot of college ball, but still look like they have like another leap in them to do. And those are going to be the kind of guys I'm looking at. But any thoughts on that? Really?
Yeah, Eric Rivers is another guy that comes to mind.
Sure.
Uh, Making the jump from FIU to Georgia Tech, obviously is a pretty drastic jump in opponent play. And if he can, stay with the same level of production, I don't think his quarterback play was really all that good at all. Now that he's going to have Haynes King under center, I could honestly see him being better in production, and that could, line him up for a day 2, maybe even better draft position. So I think he is in a pretty good spot. He's just got to adjust to the competition.
Yep, I agree. Some other things. Look, basketball's got a few important commitments we wanted to hit on. Um, a lot of y'all are familiar with Peyton Marshall. He was a big time recruit at center from the Atlanta area. He went to Missouri originally, entered the transfer portal this time around, and is going to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech was a finalist last time, weren't able to land him, but that is his spot. They landed an international prospect as well too, a German prospect. I don't want to mispronounce his name and butcher it, so I'm not going to try to. They made some important additions. I've said this plenty of times. It's we're kind of in the wait and see mode, with this roster and this coaching staff and this program. I think you can make the argument that these have been some good additions, like getting Cam Craft from Miami, Ohio. He's a good shooter, was a former 4-star recruit that went to Xavier. Like he's got some pedigree to him. We just got to see some results. Like that's just where I'm at with it. Like you can also make the case that Marshall didn't play a ton at Missouri, and is he really, how much of an impact is he going to make? I don't know. Well, I think the long story short here, I just think it's I'm in a wait and see mode when it comes to basketball.
Yeah, and I think I really got to see results because last year, Damon's transfer class, a lot of those guys spent a lot of last year injured. So we didn't even get to really see um, how good Luke O'Brien was and how good all these other guys that he brought in uh, were due to injury. And honestly, they fit kind of the same bill. Like Luke O'Brien to me is Cam Craft. Ryan Mutombo to me is Peyton Marshall. And those are two guys that I think if you develop them right, obviously a 7-footer is going to succeed at any level with good coaching. And I think, Peyton Marshall could fit that. And I think Cam Craft, obviously, I'm a big Mac guy, was great in the Mac. He's a great shooter. It's just a matter of can you develop those guys, and if they stay healthy, how good of an addition are they? And I really want to see some changes with that, just because of what the transfer class was last year. And that's not entirely Damon's fault. It's just when most of your guys are injured on the team and you have 6 scholarship players, like your roster isn't very deep, and you don't. It's hard to judge how good players are.
Yeah, I mean that's my thing. Like you can make the case for some of these guys again, like Cam Craft being a really helping this team spacing and shooting ability. Peyton Marshall filling that void in the middle, and did this kid they picked up today? Maybe I think there's a chance he starts at point guard for the team. We just haven't seen it, and so, again, some of it is out of his control with injuries. I
Yeah.
will admit that, but like Damon hasn't exactly been the transfer portal wizard either. So there's definitely should be some healthy skepticism with all these, but also some hope. Like I don't I don't want anybody just to be cynic about it. Like we'll see what happens and see if these guys can make an impact and what kind of season is going to be. We'll touch on baseball just briefly. Like I don't think anybody wants to hear a lot about this right now. Now the losing streak was snapped yesterday. You had some big hits from Drew Burrish and Kent Smith yesterday. Um, they beat Virginia, lost the series, but they did end up beating the Cavaliers yesterday. Snapped a 7-game losing streak that dated back to the Georgia game, which feels like 1,000 years ago. Like that, the losing streak was so long. So it's most of y'all know I covered the Atlanta Hawks. Like the night that Georgia Tech lost to Georgia was the same night the Hawks lost a play-in tournament game to the Orlando Magic. And like the Hawks season has been over for like a hot minute. So it's like that's how long that losing streak like felt like it was. Like it was like a good little bit, but it's over. They don't have a midweek matchup this week. They get a 3-game series against Western Carolina at home this weekend. They should sweep that. I'm not really like it would be alarming if they lost even one game of that. Like that would not be good. I'm hope you hope they can sweep that, do what they should do, and then maybe they get some confidence back under them because like it just looks like a different team than what we saw even just like 3 weeks ago. But again, their RPI fell to 33, I believe it was today. It was 29 earlier in the week before the Virginia series, I think, so dropped a little bit. I still think they're a good bet to make the tournament. They just need to play better here down the stretch. They're 4th in the ACC. Any baseball thoughts?
No, my big thing is I don't even honestly think they're playing that bad in an individual player way. It's just whenever you see these games, none of the games are cohesive. Like even the Virginia game, you needed 2 home runs in the bottom of the 10th after Mason Patel went 3 scoreless to even take the final game in the series. I mean, even though you didn't win the series, um, I just want to see them be able to string like full baseball games together. Like no no bad mistakes at the plate, no bad mistakes in the field, no bad mistakes on the mound. I don't think I've seen that from this team in a couple of weeks. It feels like, And I think they do have the potential. Like there was a reason that Georgia Tech was a top 15 team in the country, and I think they have all the talent in the world. They just all need to have it at the same time, and I think they haven't for a while. But now you're heading into a series where you can get a lot of wins, you can get back on your feet, and they have to do that. They just hit the 30 win mark, but you have to go further. You can't let off the gas. You can't head into this Carolina series, and drop a game. And I don't think they will. I think that Virginia game helps a lot, regardless of how sloppy it was. It helps you get focused. A win helps you get focused under any circumstances. And I think I do trust the guys. I trust Burris. I trust Schmidt, and I trust Patel. He's been on fire.
Yeah, the talent's there, but we just got to see it all. And there's even a case to be made. If you're being a glass half full guys, like, hey, they're having a little bit of a rough stretch now, but that's better than 2 or 3 weeks down the road when it's the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament. Like, let's get this bad baseball out of the way. I'm not saying that can't happen in the future, but it's like, again, trying to be like Mr. Optimism here and like, hey, like, rather this happen now than 2 or 3 weeks down the road.
Yeah.
But again, like, I'm genuinely more optimistic than most people, so that could just be a me problem. So our main topic today, like we said, we didn't do a show last week because the transfer portal was open and it wasn't open very long. So we didn't want to come do a show talking about the transfer portal stuff and then they keep adding to it, because that's kind of what happened. So we kind of went into this period where we were like, okay, well, what does Georgia Tech need? And we said right tackle, an experienced right tackle, one that could come in and more than likely start. Like, maybe you don't like absolutely guarantee it. Like, obviously every player's got to earn their spot, but you could maybe rely on this guy to start. They got that. Defensive line depth, they got that on the interior. They didn't add an edge rusher or anything. I don't know that there were a ton of high quality guys edge rusher wise. Like, in my personal opinion, and I think this is generally the consensus as well, that the spring transfer portal window is not just filled to the brim with top tier talent. Like, you have some guys here and there, and that's not like to speak down on the guys that Georgia Tech brought in, but it's just in terms of high impact starters and quality guys. I don't think there's a lot of that. But they added some defensive tackle depth, and they also added some depth in the secondary, which, after Saeed Gibbs leaving in the portal, Troy Stevenson having an injury, like, that was important. Like, that was, getting, like, I wasn't alarmed about the secondary, but it's like we saw at the end of the season, especially in the Georgia game, where it like just there were just bodies going down and there were just not enough guys. Like, you had to put Warren Burrell back out there who was already injured. So it's like trying to get some quality guys. So they did that. So looking at the guys they brought in, so you had Colorado safety, Savion Riley. Look, so we'll just kind of go with these guys one by one. I'll start with him. He is a guy that has played a lot of football. He started at Vanderbilt, was pretty good at Vanderbilt, went to Miami. He spent I don't even want to know if you want to call it a semester at Miami. He was there for like spring practice, and I think he re-entered the portal. Played at Colorado last year, was kind of a depth guy, played some special teams. He did play, and then re-entered the portal and is coming back to Georgia Tech, or coming to Georgia Tech, I should say, back to Georgia Tech. So, like, to me, he's a depth guy. Like, I don't know that he's necessarily going to start. I don't know that he's – and that's the – like, some of these guys I do think are starters, but I don't like, we'll see what is the true impact. To me, he's a depth guy and a guy maybe you can move around the field. Like, I think he could play safety. I think I don't know if he could play nickel maybe necessarily, but, he's 6'2", 200 pounds. Like, he could do some different things if you wanted him to. And, like, special teams is probably going to be on his plate as well. But kind of what did you think of him being brought in?
Yeah, I thought it was great. There's another guy that we're going to talk about that should be pretty similar to Georgia Tech fans, and I think Riley might be a little bit too. The last time he was in the transfer portal, there was pretty, he was in the final stretch of Georgia Tech. Like, he was choosing between Georgia Tech, Colorado, and a couple of other schools, and it seemed to me that he was going to choose Georgia Tech. Didn't end up going that way, but after spending a season at Colorado, he's here, and hopefully, you can keep him out of the portal. And I think, he is a guy who is just looking for some opportunity. I think he was very solid at Vanderbilt. He's a guy who can play in the box. He's a guy who's very good in run support. He's not like your typical, coverage safety, but he doesn't need to be. He's a great tackler in the open field. I think he brings a lot, and I think he will play a decent amount. It also just depends on how the guys in front of him shake out, because I don't know exactly where he'll play, but I know he's not your traditional coverage safety guy. Like he will play um, in the box and run support, and that's the kind of the role he's going to fit. But honestly, it was one of my favorite transfer portal additions from this cycle.
Yeah, it was a good pickup, just for a number of reasons. Second guy, we'll just staying in the secondary right quick, is John Mitchell, a cornerback from Penn State, former 4-star recruit, played a little bit of ball at Penn State last year. Again, we talked about Saeed Gibbs leaving. We talked about Troy Stevenson having an injury, and we had kind of talked about all off season and leading into the spring about, hey, like who's going to start next to Amari Harvey or opposite of Amari Harvey? Is it Zach Toby? Is like, who is it? I don't know if John Mitchell will start, but I think is going to be brought in, and I think there's going to be some competition. Like I think it's a good player to add. 5'11", 183. Again, if I had to guess, I think it's a depth thing more than any above all else. But I like the pickup.
Yeah, I do too. And again, he's another guy we were talking about. He was a 4-star at a high school, so he has all of the skills. He has all of the traits, and I think he can battle for it. But he has so many years of eligibility left. There's so many guys ahead of him in the secondary. It's just you really needed bodies. God forbid, in case an injury happens, like you needed people to fill that depth role, and I think he will fit that. But I also think he can battle for some playing time.
Yeah, I mean that's my thing too. I think there's some clear upside for playing time, and even if it's not this year, again, he's a young kid. Like he can, I know in this transfer portal day and age, like it's hard to envision kids like staying for multiple years and developing. But if he does, even if he doesn't start this year, like there's a chance he can develop into a starter next year down the road. Like I think this is a long-term play with some short-term upside is how I would classify. Like I think there's a chance he could play this year, but also if he doesn't, no need to panic. Another defensive back addition they had was Jyrone Gilmore from Georgia State, another Georgia State player coming on to Georgia Tech. He did play a little bit last year. I think I could see him playing in the nickel, 5'9", 180. Like his size certainly fits that profile. I think he can just kind of fill the role Saeed Gibbs played last year. I think Rodney Shelley's going to start at nickel, but I think this guy can come in and provide depth. Like even when Shelley was healthy, like Gibbs played a little bit too. Like you need depth at this position and guys that can come in, and like that's just kind of how I see his role playing out here.
Yeah, and another underrated part of it is, he's a guy that's played 5 years of college football. So he has all the experience. Like he started the first year, 20 at Tennessee Tech, and he even been transferring, got more and more reps while increasing the level. So I'd imagine he'd still uh, be competing for a lot of those because he had the most. He had his biggest numbers at Georgia State after he transferred up from the FCS level. You don't really see that a lot. Normally, you see guys go up to a bigger level and you see them drop off. But he was a pretty crucial piece of that Georgia State secondary, and I think he can do the same thing in Georgia Tech. I don't think he'll start, but I think he will. Like you said, I think he'll fill that Saeed Gibbs role where he's going to rotate in. He's going to play a lot.
Yep, I agree with you. Again, probably play on special teams as well. It's
He
something I
he
would
can field
probably
kickoffs too. He's done that before.
exactly, and that's that. Like, I know like sometimes you'll mention like special team stuff, and like some people just roll their eyes. Like, you can get anybody to do that, but having good special teams players, like that's like just I wouldn't scoff at that. Just natural like that. That's very important. And I think having like capable guys to come in and do that is no small thing. Um, so those are the three guys they brought in on the secondary. We'll hit on the offensive line right quick before we get to a very, very familiar name along the defensive line. So South Alabama offensive tackle Malachi Carney committed to Georgia Tech. Now he's started a few years at South Alabama. He's been pretty solid. Look, I will say this, he's over the past couple of years, his PFF grades, again, for those that, look at that kind of thing, haven't been overwhelmingly great. Like they haven't been terrible, but they've been kind of in the mid to low 60s on some things. Even some grades in the 50s and stuff. But he's gotten progressively better from just a grade perspective since he's been there. and I think he'll probably be the front runner to start. I won't guarantee it just because a group of five guy coming into a power four level, like you can never. Sometimes it just doesn't work, and I don't think his pedigree and I don't think his body work like should automatically suggest he is just a lock to start. I think it's likely, but I don't. I'm not going to just say slam dunk, lock it in. He's going to start. But look, we thought they would go after an experienced right tackle. Look, you had Jamison Riggs, who still could win the job. We'll see in fall camp. Redshirt freshman, Jordan Floyd. He's redshirt freshman, and then you've got Peyton Joseph, the true freshman. Like that was what you were looking at right tackle in the spring. And look, those guys are talented. I love those guys. Maybe they're just not ready yet. Like having no experience over there on the right tackle after having Jordan Williams for like what felt like a decade almost. That's a difference. And getting Malachi Carney, I think he's experienced. He's not perfect. I'm not suggesting he's going to come in, but I think he can be very solid. I think he's pretty good in pass protection. Love to see the run blocking get a little bit better. I think he does fit the scheme. He's 6'4", 312 pounds. I think it's a sensible addition. I think he probably starts. I'm kind of in wait and see mode of how good he is because again, going from group to five up to power four is a pretty big jump.
Yeah, and for a guy that hasn't, necessarily started multiple years, 2023, like he did play in most of South Alabama's games. He only got 2 starts, but he does have the build, like 6'4", 312, and we've seen how Georgia Tech can develop guys, either transfers or true freshmen on the offensive line. Like I think that's been a strength of this Georgia Tech team ever since Brent Key has taken over. Like he's making it an effort, and I think he does evaluate offensive linemen pretty well. So maybe there is something in Carney that the staff saw, and I think that is something fair. Do I know if he'll start day one? I'm not entirely sure, but I also wouldn't doubt it because he's the guy. Again, he has experience. Like he had 3 years at South Alabama. He didn't play the first one, but he does have the build, and you have one of the most talented staffs in the country in developing offensive linemen. So I think if everything shakes out well, he'll get that right tackle job.
Yeah, and I mean we've said it plenty. Like until they give us a reason not to, like I do think that Brent Key and Jeep Wade deserve the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the offensive line. Like they do pretty good job evaluating whether it's portal. You had Keelan Rutledge coming here last year, his freaking all ACC, first team, or whether it's just recruiting and developing guys, even before Brent Key was head coach, he had Weston Franklin and Joe Fusile and Jordan Williams, and those all became all ACC offensive linemen under him, continuing on to when he was head coach. So again, until they make a big mistake or miss out on something, I genuinely think they deserve benefit of the doubt, and I'm willing to give it to them for this. So the last name we'll talk about here is one that every Tech fan knows, Akilo Stone, who went into the transfer portal from Georgia Tech a couple of years ago. So I believe it was like the day after he won spring game MVP or something along those lines. I was there covering that game. I want to say it was like the next day or maybe the Monday after. He jumped into the portal, went to Ole Miss, played there as kind of a rotational defensive tackle for the past couple of years with the Rebels, entered the portal again, and he is now back at Georgia Tech for his final season of college football. I think this makes pretty much all the sense in the world. Like Georgia Tech needed a depth piece in the interior. I don't necessarily know if he'll start either because I do think you've got Vandenberg. I think they're pretty pleased with Matthew Alexander. But we kind of talked about like what was beyond them, and a lot of it was just young talent. Like it was Christian Garrett. It was just those younger, either redshirt or true freshmen. And it was like, yeah, we like those guys' talent, but it's like, if you're hoping to contend in the ACC, like I know Georgia Tech wants to do this year, is like, can you rely on a bunch of young guys at a very crucial position? And I didn't know if they would take one or multiple guys here. I thought there was a chance they'd take multiple, but we did see one guy they were pursuing, Braxton Feely from Boise State. He actually ended up withdrawing from the portal entirely and going back to Boise State. I knew he visited Cal and Miami, and I knew Georgia Tech made his top 6 schools. But so I didn't. And again, this spring transfer portal window was not great when it came to deep, like really good defensive tackles. I actually think Akilo Stone may have been either the best or one of the 2 or 3 best defensive tackles in the portal this cycle. So it was good on tech. I think obviously the familiarity with Key and everything. I know Jess Simpson and Kyle Pope and Blake Gideon weren't here when the Kilo Stone was last year, but I at least think the familiarity with Key and some others, definitely helped. But I like it. It's a good move. I think he could definitely make an impact. He's gonna. I can guarantee he's gonna play again. I don't know if he starts necessarily next to Vandenberg, but I think this is a pretty good addition.
Yeah, and I think honestly he could slot into that uh, third defensive tackle slot. Like I think he can play a decent amount. He was, I believe, the third or second highest available defensive tackle at 247 Sports out of the guys that hadn't committed. So I think you made a splash and you had a guy come home who was already here for a pretty long time, and then kind of found his footing at Ole Miss, and now he's back with vengeance. I guess is a way to put it. I think he can. Honestly, I think he. I don't think he'll start the season starting, but I think he can play himself into a starting role, just because of how sheerly talented he is, and I think he did develop pretty well at Ole Miss. But again, it's a waiting game. I think he is probably the best portal edition if I had to pick one, just because of the upside, just because of where he's played. He's number one in 247 transfer portal rankings if you put any value into that at all. But I think it is a good pickup, and I think it is. It's funny to me seeing a guy transfer out of a place and then transfer back into a place. I guess it was better in Atlanta the whole time along.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. And look, I still think even though they getting him, I still think you're going to have some young guys step up on the interior of the defense. Like this is still like you got to have multiple guys. You still got like guys like Jason Moore, who has played football, before this. It's not like he's totally inexperienced, but Shymeek Jones, Christian Garrett, Derry Norris, Blake Beelan, those guys, like somebody is going to have to step up and provide some actual snaps. I think like, I don't think even if say Jason Moore ends up being a pretty crucial part of the rotation, I don't think you want to go in with just 4 guys at detail. Like I think ideally you'd like to have like 6 or 7 guys in the interior. I know that may seem a little unrealistic, but it's just in terms of being able to throw bodies at the position and having guys there. I think that's ideal. So I still think you need some guys to step up, but I think a Kilo Stone makes all the sense in the world to bring back.
Yeah, and I love the pickup. He fit, exactly the need. Like we talked about, like you talked about, maybe you need an edge rusher. You definitely need a defensive tackle, and you need safety room. And I think they picked up all of the big needs that they had. I think you really needed an edge rusher. You didn't get one. You filled the right tackle slot. This to me is another successful Brent Key transfer portal cycle. There are a lot of teams that you know didn't fill their needs or didn't get the players that they wanted in the spring portal because it is hard. Like to get good players, you had to battle because there's not that many guys that have either played a lot or guys that have a lot of the traits. Your top guys are going to hear from a lot of schools, and I think they battled out a lot of pretty higher echelon programs to get these guys, and I think that's pretty impressive from Key.
Yep. I mean, he's certainly not perfect, but I actually do think Brent Key is a pretty good evaluator when it comes to the transfer portal. Like
Yeah.
it's whether it's Haynes King, whether it's Keelan Rutledge, um, you know, some other guys, that have certain Jordan Vandenberg just last year, those guys that come in and, make an impact. Warren Burrell was really good last year as well.
How
For
about
most,
Jackson Hawes?
Jackson Hall just got drafted. Like, yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, I do think Brent Key is one of the more underrated coaches when it comes to the transfer portal. And again, doesn't mean he bats 1,000. Like no coach out there is gonna hit on every single one, but I think he generally hits more than he misses. So that's gonna do it for our show today. I just kind of wanted to briefly get into the transfer portal window. I don't really expect Tech to be super active anymore. Like again, I know players that are in the portal can still commit and everything like that, but I think we're pretty close to Georgia Tech having their roster set for what could be a very good upcoming 2025 season. But again, that's going to do it for our show today. Again, before we get out of here, if you haven't subscribed to the show already and you're watching this, would love it if you would hit subscribe to the show, like the channel. We love the progress we're making. Just want to keep continuing going forward, and love the support you guys always show us. Follow us wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a review there. Tell us how we're doing. Love the comments. Love reading them. Again, just can't thank you enough for all the support you guys have shown. We'll be back with a new episode next week. But until then, see you later.